Good afternoon. I can see Jenny, who I think is, oh, she's joined us there. Jenny, very good to see you late in the afternoon in Singapore. I mean, the past 10 years have been so explosive for private markets. And at the center of that really has been venture capital, just in terms of the multiplication of assets being directed at venture capital opportunities really all around the world. I think I looked at a statistic and found that venture capital had grown about 8 times in the past decade or so, which is absolutely extraordinary. So I'm delighted to be joined today by 3 very high-profile venture capital investors. And we're going to explore in 20 minutes, if that's at all possible, where kind of some of the big ideas are, not necessarily tomorrow, but really looking out for the next 10 years or so. Of course, the past 12 months have been a little bit more problematic, but let's not dwell too much on that. I think the whole business of investing in venture capital is, by nature, very much longer term than just 1 year. And I suppose at the heart of venture capital is trying to find businesses that have got innovative new products and services. And I guess as investors, that's what you are looking out for the whole time. And really at the very center of that is technology. And I would suggest that we're probably only at the very early stages of, I suppose, what we could call the technology supercycle or the 4th industrial revolution, as I think some people refer to it. But you guys can tell me a lot more about your views on that. So let's get started. Ibrahim, let me turn to you first, and thank you very much for Mubadala for sponsoring and being a leader of this particular event. But you've been in technology for a long time. You lead the ventures business there. So from the perspective of a sovereign wealth fund, interested to hear just how you are looking at venture now in the hindsight of everything we've seen. It's been explosive, valuations have pumped up, but really looking forward to the future, both here in the region and also amongst some of your global investments.
Yeah. Well, let me start by, I think the way you started in framing the conversation, which is really at the heart of what we do, and Jenny and Courtney are really good at that, is really finding genius. That's what we do for a living. That's our craft, really. We just want to go find genius, and then we support them. And these are the founders. And sovereign wealth funds historically did not do that. That's not the lens of how we looked at the world when we looked at investments, which is being out there, finding the founders, having a very deep founder kinship way of investing and helping founders. So we spent the past 10 years really building that muscle, that capability, which is around going out there and finding founders, finding genius, and putting all the resources of a sovereign behind them. So at its core, what we do at Mubadala and what we've made happen and what we continue to build and refine is do 2 things at the same time, which is be quick, agile, in the field, in the community, finding the founders, the genius that's going to shape the future, and then putting the resources and the power and the network and the capital of a sovereign wealth fund. That, if we can execute on that, there's magic in that. That's really the craft of what we do at Mubadala Ventures.
I'll come back to that in a point about you're in the business of finding genius, and ask probably of all the 3 people here is that whether that bar for genius has gone up by what has been going on in the past year or so. But Courtney, let me turn to you. You're from California originally, but you've now moved to the region. You've been here for quite a while.
3 years, yes.
Now that must be also for investing reasons. Talk us through that kind of thought process that brought you out here and what you're seeing particularly here, and then we'll probably expand that into some of the global opportunities that you are seeing at 500.
Sure. So a little bit of context. As you said, 500 Global is a multi-stage venture capital firm. We started in Silicon Valley back in 2010, but very quickly decided that we wanted to begin investing globally because our thesis was these emerging markets, nascent markets are largely undervalued. It's a great opportunity to go in, invest alongside the growth of the ecosystem, and uncover these incredible founders. So, fast forward to around 2019, 2020, when we started really thinking about, myself moving to the region. At that point, we had over, or nearly, I should say, 50 companies valued at over $1 billion in our portfolio, and half of those unicorns came from outside the United States. So we felt very strongly that our investment thesis was being validated and that we really wanted to double down on our efforts. The Middle East was a really bright spot in terms of what we expected in GDP growth, in the youth population, in the sovereign wealth funds supporting the ongoing development of the regulatory infrastructure and the future of entrepreneurship. So we made the call. We have partners. We're investing in 80 countries today. And for me, the Middle East was just terribly exciting in terms of our expectations. And to date, we've invested in over 400 companies across the region.
And I think that's an interesting point. You said that half of the investments you found are outside the US.
Correct.
If you go back to, I don't know, 15 years ago, if you think where venture capital was being invested, over 2/3 of it were in the United States, and probably in the United States, over 2/3 of that were
there's an incredible
Valley.
stat that basically, if you look at all of the capital deployed in the early innings of venture capital, it was within roughly like a 2-mile radius of Menlo Park. So that in and of itself tells you how how the industry began. But today, it is truly a global game.
And I think that's a very key point. The menu, I suppose, of investing opportunity for firms and for yourselves is large. It's growing, but I think probably very notable that it is a lot more global than it ever has been. And I'm going to come to you, Jenny, now, actually, because you're out in Asia Pacific. And I think one of the things, and Courtney, you brought it up there about the kind of population demographics can sometimes be quite a big driver. The Asia Pacific region, and then we include India in that, is just huge, Jenny. And that in itself means that the opportunity set must be very significant there. Add to that the kind of the demographic particularities that you find in that region, a younger population, very tech savvy. Talk us through what you're seeing in the region that you're covering there. And if you could pick out any sort of high spots, either countries or any particular sectors where you're seeing excellence, or should we call it genius, that you're sourcing for decent investment opportunities.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Thank you, Jack. So just a little bit of a background as well. I think GGB, 2000, we started as a global firm. And so over the last 23 years, we've been following entrepreneurs, founders around the world, right? Around markets like the US or China, now Southeast Asia, into Middle East. And so as the founders move and make their startups in new places, we're able to follow the talent and follow the ideas. So Jack, as you mentioned, sitting in ASEAN, and Ray Dalio in his remarks also identified ASEAN as a very interesting emerging regions. I think, what we are seeing here is a confluence of various drivers. I think, first of all, we have to acknowledge that while venture capital is a long-term business and we are looking for trends next 10, 20 years, it is also true that in the last 3-5 years, with geopolitics, with the world trying to bifurcate, technology bifurcating, even when you sit in ASEAN, these are all considerations that has to come in as we look at opportunity set. So roughly, I like to highlight maybe 3 trends that we are seeing. I think the first trend in ASEAN, sitting in ASEAN, many countries here, 5 billion population, there is definitely the first trend here is around country specific. And this would be defensive trend that we're seeing, whether it's around AI, whether it's around semiconductor, whether it's around even space technology. There's increasingly government participation in this so-called country-specific defensive opportunity, right? So that, I would say, is the first type of exciting opportunities that we are seeing. The second, I think, sitting in ASEAN, it's about the region. And the region cannot, be great as a venture capital region by one country alone. And so when you look at ASEAN, the 600+ million population in Southeast Asia, it's about connecting technologies. And so connecting technologies is about digitization. It's about the online component, connecting that population, whether it's in terms of commerce, trade, identity, payment, and then of course correspondingly offline, it's about infra, data centers, it's about logistics that connects the Southeast Asia region. And then lastly, I think the third trend is that we sitting in ASEAN or in Asia, we cannot dissociate ourselves from the world, right? So the third trend really is global unifying trends, and some of the speakers in earlier panels has talked about as well. We are also seeing, there are technology influencing the food ecosystem, whether it's agri-tech, aqua-tech, whether it's EV, energy migration, countries getting onto, new EV adoption. And then lastly, I think around global unifying trend is that whole real supply chain being restructured. And I actually believe that ASEAN and the Middle East will continue, to benefit from the supply chain restructuring that's happening.
Yeah. Thank you, Jenny. Want to come back to kind of what a good entrepreneur looks like, and back to this genius point. Most of my background is in the hedge fund industry, and I remember when long-term capital failed, and there was a book written titled "When Genius Failed." Given we've gone through a bit of a tougher time, there were huge tailwinds supporting the venture capital industry for well over a decade after the global financial crisis, and some might say that those have turned into headwinds in some respect, with interest rates where they are. Inflation, the general economic uncertainty, everything we know about. Thinking about where that bar is for an entrepreneur, what do they need to look like in this new environment to attract money? Because it seems to me that you're probably going to be, this is probably the wrong way of putting it, more discerning about where you put your money now, take a bit more time to deploy capital than the rush that seemed to be going on. But what do you look for, particularly amongst the founder of a startup business? And Courtney, you're in early stage quite a bit. What stands out for you, and what criteria do they need to meet now?
Yes, I think certainly being able to spot the magic is the game that we're in. But I think especially today, entrepreneurs have a lot of access to information that simply didn't exist 20 years ago. And I think that information has really empowered more and more founders to be at least aware of entrepreneurship as an option and willing to start companies. I think within the broader group of companies being founded worldwide, you're really still looking for founders who have a unique point of view that they're trying to bring to the world. Like at the heart of it, they're trying to solve some problem that they believe exists. And I think something that's really critical in our assessments of the investments we make is number one, how skilled are they going to be? What unique point of view, unique advantage, unique moat or distribution channel they've identified in order to be able to tackle this problem. And I think even more importantly is how closely they're willing to listen and adapt to the customer base, whom they may not even know at the onset, and be able to build a program or a product that it suits and is one day monetizable. So sounds easy, very tricky.
Yeah, I mean, just listen. You seem to like that word genius, Jack, right? You sort of attach yourself to it, but we are a lot more discerning now.
Yeah.
Listen, we all got ahead of ourselves. We got ahead of ourselves, but just to build on what Courtney said, we have time, and we now have more time. And with that time, you're able to get to know the founder and build a good dialogue with the founder. And you would expect that that founder is also willing to invest time to get to know you as the investor. And if that founder is not willing or she's not willing to invest that time, then at least you know very quick that that's not the founder or the company you want to invest the next 10 to 15 years with. And we've learned in the past 3 years that great companies take time. It takes 10 to 15 years to build a great company. It's no longer 12 to 18 months. So the bar is much, much higher today than it's ever been. And I just want to add to Jenny's Jenny sort of mapped three forces that are shaping, or three trends that are shaping how she looks at her investments in Asia. And I just want to make this one statement because it also adds to a lot of the forces that are shaping. since the start of the venture capital industry in the 1970s or 60s in Silicon Valley, well, some could argue Boston or some could argue Silicon Valley, but sovereign wealth funds have never been in a stronger position and in a better position to shape, capture, and drive innovation and value creation. This is the time for sovereign wealth funds. Why? Because, number one, the ground has shifted. Capital, we used to hear capital is a commodity. No, it's not a commodity. Capital is very scarce to find. And good capital supporting founders is very, very. So founders and investors have reset. We've reset. I know Jenny is reset because we work very closely with them. Number two is the emergence of the GCC. We've been hearing about this all day, and it's in The Economist, and everybody's writing about it. The GCC has been investing in tech for some time, but for the first time, as Courtney said, there's a focus on investing in founders and the regulatory environment and making sure we have all the different elements to shape technology. Technology is very critical to the future of these societies. It's no longer just an asset class that we allocate to. And last but not least is, as we've been hearing about and learning, is what AI is doing today to the world of technology, to our society at large. And this is not just a technology shift, it's a real, true economic shift. Before, a lot of people here in this room, when they wanted legal advice, you would call up a lawyer, you'd pay $500 an hour, and you get an answer in 24 hours. Now you can get an answer in 1 second, and it'll cost you 0.001 cent of inferencing cost to get the same exact answer. That's a real economic shift. So just imagine what these societies over the next 10 years are going to benefit from this massive technology and economic shift. It's why I'm saying, and why we believe, that sovereign wealth funds can really play a pivotal role in that shift.
Yeah. And if I could just add something quickly, just a point here that I think is often missed about the development of Silicon Valley and Massachusetts as well. We may not have had sovereign wealth funds in the US, but we did have DARPA. And DARPA was pouring billions of dollars into the innovation ecosystem through the universities and directly into the technologies that would go on to create the platform layer of the internet as we know it today. So I don't think there's actually that much of there shouldn't be as much of a surprise around sovereign wealth funds being able to get involved and move things forward worldwide. I think it is the right ingredients that we saw play out in economies around the world, and even better, they have a long time horizon for which they're willing to continue strategies and they're willing to judge their returns.
And finding ways to work together. We can't do what Courtney does or what Jenny does, and they can't do what we do.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's just how do we support each other and augment each other to help the founder through a very long-term journey. So the final point I'll make, Jack, is the genius has to also figure out how he or she can work with our three respective firms in the way which we add value.
Yeah, I think I picked that up quite clearly. We've got 1 minute left, and actually I'm going to give Jenny, you're going to have the last word here. I think what's very clear is that these founders don't work alone. They work very much in partnership with you in how they run their business and how you shape the technology or whatever product and service there is. Have you got kind of anything you want to add to that, Jenny? It seems to me how you work with founders most closely for kind of the mutual benefit of both your investment and their
Yeah, so I think maybe two perspectives as well. In addition, we talk about genius. I think the new genius of the next generation needs to not just respect capital and the different types of capital, whether it's long-term capital, whether it's sovereign wealth capital, or the right smart capital that can help them. I think ultimately geniuses also have to respect unit economics and their ability to drive real value from their startups, real company creation and value creation, right? And I think we are back to that world from kind of a genius perspective. I just want to throw in that. And then I think secondly, from how can the ecosystem, the startups ecosystem, the venture capitalists, the long-term capital, public, private. So what I really want to emphasize is that this world is going to get more connected, whether it's government, sovereign wealth, venture capital, and entrepreneurs, because as I mentioned, right, as we get into more of a bifurcation of technology or technology being kept in small yard high fences in different countries, it's even more important that these three stakeholders work together to ensure that whether it's the creation of new policy, for example, encouraging more EV startups to move to the Middle East, encouraging more of the climate change ecosystem players to diversify their supply chain away from China into the rest of the world. This means that the governments, the policies has actually to work in tandem with setting up the right framework to attract the right entrepreneurs, the right geniuses, and then with the combination of capital and market, creates the next generation of leaders. So it's a tougher job for all of us going forward, next 10, 20 years, but hopefully the outcome will be worth it.
I'm sure it will. Jenny, thank you very much. Courtney, Ibrahim, I think we better draw a close there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Very nice.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you.